Mr. Modi is a very strong leader. And I think everywhere you find, whether it is home or a society, if the leader is very strong, then a lot of people depend on him more than what they ought to.
Would you be comfortable sharing what were the salaries that Secretaries of India may have?
The maximum salary that the highest official in the government gets is, I think, $2,500 per month.
As of today, 2024, or this goes back
Yes.
to your time?
As
Nice.
of today.
You know that millions write civil services examination. What would be your advice to them as they are preparing for this competitive examination in India?
I'm in touch with so many youngsters who keep writing. I don't know them, but they keep sending me mails. And I keep telling them that, look, it's very important to keep steering, but it is equally important to know when to change course.
How do you think, as per your experience, the dynamics of Indian elections have changed over the year?
The worrisome aspect, I think, about Indian elections is the use of money power, lack of transparency in funding of elections.
Your family is a family of MBAs. What do you think was the value that you derived from that education?
Welcome to yet another episode of the CEO Diary on Shatakshi Show. If you like this podcast, feel free to hit on the like button and of course share it with your friends so that we get motivated to bring many more phenomenal leaders, and I really hope that you enjoy this one.
So welcome to the CEO Diary. I am personally very excited to welcome you on the CEO Diary show of Shatakshi Show. It's an immense pleasure for me, especially given you have been an instructor at Global Governance Initiative and you have held many positions such as the Secretary Finance, Secretary Environment, and of course, Election Commissioner of India as well. So the world might know you from a lot of these designations. To start, would it be really great if you could also briefly introduce yourself in your own words, and then we'll take it forward from there. But welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shatakshi. First of all, I want to compliment you and the Global Governance Initiative. I think it's a very innovative, imaginative way of approaching capacity building. So I acknowledge that, especially since I have had the opportunity of addressing a masterclass, and I thought it was very exciting. The ability to reach out to youngsters and to answer their questions or to respond to their curiosity, I think that's very, very beneficial both ways. And as far as I am concerned, well, you introduced me. My last assignment was Vice President of Asian Development Bank, where I was looking after promotion of public-private partnership as well as promotion of private sector business in Asia and the Pacific. But to go back to earlier times, if that's what you want to hear, well, I was born in Jaipur. My mother is from Tonk, which is a district near Jaipur, and my father was in the Royal Air Force before independence. Thereafter, he did miscellaneous job. By the way, he lost his parents when he was 5 and 8. He was 5 when he lost his mother, and he was 8 when he lost his father. So he is pretty much a self-made man, and I had, I would say, the great opportunity of writing a book on his life, which is called An Ordinary Life. But since he was in the private world, he moved to Surat to find a job, where I had my very initial experience of going to a school, and then he shifted to Vadodara, which was known as Baroda at that time. There was a company there, Hindustan Tractors Limited, where he worked, and I studied there till the 4th standard. And by the way, that education was all in Gujarati. And then I joined a military school in Belgaum. It's a competitive process. You appear for an examination and you get through. So all my schooling from 5th to 11th was in Belgaum. Then I went to college in Delhi. I did my English honors and then went on to do MA in English. I taught in the Delhi University for a year and a half. And then I had a short flirtation with the State Bank of India. And thereafter, I found myself in the civil services. And in the civil services, I have been working in both the state governments as well as the central government. I was in Haryana. So half of my life was in the state, and the other half was in Government of India. And in between, I was fortunate that I got a chance to do my MBA in Australia at the Southern Cross University. I also did my MPhil in Defense Studies when I did my course in the National Defense College in Delhi. And I have been to Harvard to attend some training programs. And the rest of it is pretty routine stuff. But I've had a very exciting life.
Very beautiful. I wasn't aware about you writing a book on your father's journey. That must have been such a ride as well. And I will certainly have a lot of interesting questions from MBA and about educational qualification, especially a lot of people are now questioning the value or the lack of value of an MBA degree. May I double click upon a little bit about your parents and your journey? How was your relationship? What kind of nurturing or what kind of parenting did you have? What kind of parenting were you able to give to your children? Are your children also bureaucrats? So can we just get into a little bit of those details?
So let me first talk about parenting, the kind of parenting that we had. One can go on and on. In fact, I've written a lot in the book about how they sort of allowed us to grow. I wouldn't even say how they brought us up. They allowed us to grow. And that's very much the way we brought up our children. Let me get that out of the way first. We have a daughter who is also in the civil services. She works for the state cadre, no longer the state cadre. She's in the Agmut cadre, but she's worked for 10 years in Jammu and Kashmir. And as we speak, she's pursuing a postgraduate program in urban planning and design in Harvard. It's called the School of Design, I think. We have a son who's working for Interglobe, the company that holds Indigo. And he did his MBA, and he's into marketing and product management and all the things that happen in the private sector, about which I don't know much. But he's enjoying himself. He is a cricket player. He played till Ranji Trophy, but thereafter I think he had some back issues, because of which he had to change course, and he restarted his studies, and then that's where he is. Both of them are married, and both of them spouses who work. My daughter's husband is a colonel in the army, and my son's wife is a consultant. She's also an MBA. They were in class together. So she works for a consulting firm. About the values, I think 3 or 4 things which stand out. One, I think we were brought up in an atmosphere where liberal thinking, open-mindedness was promoted. So I don't recall our parents ever telling us that do this and don't do this. They allowed us to make our choices. If we sought advice, they provided advice. They also offered us opportunities which they thought were in our interest, but pretty much they left the choice to us. So that's how I, reflect on my childhood. So I'll give you an example which will illustrate. So in the school where I was, it was automatic that those who were so-called brilliant students, they were put in the science stream, and those who were the duffers, they were in the humanities. So I was a reasonably good student. I used to be either first, second or third in my class, and that was the result in the 8th as well. But when the results came, I told my father that I want to study humanities. So he said, go ahead if you want to do that. Why do you want to study humanities? I said, I want to become a judge, because I had done a little role in a play as a judge. So he wrote a letter to the principal that he should be allowed to take humanities. When I went back to the school after the summer break, I was put in the A section, which was science, right? But then on the very first day, I was called by the principal. He was an army officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sobjon. And he said, have you gone mad? But then because my father had written a letter, he let me join the humanities stream. And I think a lot of what I've done in life and the way I look at life is because I studied humanities. So that's one example. 2 other things that I want to mention, which I think have influenced me and my personality and the way I worked. One is, my father used to always believe, and my mother, that you should never be scared of anything. You should follow the straight path. Don't be scared. If you're not in the wrong, don't be scared. And keep persisting with what you think is right. And also, one other thing which I later learned, this is not what they said, but my feeling is that you learn a lot of things by watching the way your parents live, not necessarily by listening to them. So a lot of times, if as a child you feel that there is a dichotomy between what they're saying and what they're doing themselves, I don't think that will make a big impression. You will not follow what they're saying. So that was one. The other thing is what he used to call kifayat. Kifayat is to use whatever resources you have very judiciously so that you can achieve the maximum outcome. And this is, what in modern terminology is called getting more out of less. So they never wasted anything. All our books used to be covered by polythene, which was retrieved from shopping bag. So that's one example. And the other is when Lal Bahadur Shastri gave a call in 1965 when he became the Prime Minister. 64 he became the Prime Minister, and after the war with Pakistan and the problem that India was having with PL 480, he gave a call that every Indian should miss a meal in a week. And sure enough, that was the time when they adopted this practice that they will observe a fast on every Monday. So, things like these, And one final thing that I want to mention is, which is what was inculcated even in our school. The maximum punishment in the school was reserved for people who took a shortcut. So, if there is a path that takes you to the class from your hostel, you dare not take a shortcut. You follow that path. Somebody might say that this is too much of regimentation. But I think the message that was being conveyed was that follow a process. Don't be in a hurry to achieve what you want to achieve. So I think those are some of the things which have registered in my mind and I recall very, very gratefully.
Beautiful. I really concur with the emotion that children learn more by observing parents rather than just by what they many a time say. And a beautiful anecdote of Lal Bahadur Shastri Ji calling out Indians on observing a fast or skipping a meal. You mentioned a very interesting thing. It seems like your family is a family of MBAs. And you yourself, and I'm very sure a lot of people in your generation may not have had the opportunity of doing an MBA. In your case specifically, I see two phenomena. One is that you also got a chance to study outside, which is what a lot of people yearn for. And then you also got a chance to study business administration. What do you think was the value that you derived from that education, or certain things that might have been missing, especially in the current context, if we were to apply them?
So before I answer that question, I just want to make an additionality to what you said. I have one brother and two sisters who are older to me. My eldest sister is a pediatrician and an allergy specialist. So she's a doctor. The one next to her is a microbiologist. And she's spent about almost 2 decades in the United States. Now they have come back. My older brother is an engineer. So he's an entrepreneur now. So it's not as if that in the family there was a common stream of education. Everybody did what he wanted or what he thought he was good at. Now, about the value of MBA. See, what I feel is that there are 3 or 4 big takeaways that you derive when you do a master's in business administration. So first of all, business administration, I think, is a modern subject. I don't think it existed in the 19th century. But business existed in the 19th century. So by observing, if I can digress a little, for example, people wrote poetry even before Aristotle wrote Poetica. But what Aristotle did was to understand and infer that what are the common things running, what are the techniques which go into a good poem. So similarly, I think people who have evolved the subject of business administration, they have very carefully observed, analyzed, and then produced what is knowledge. Having said that, I think first you understand in business, how do you value your resource? That you cannot achieve optimum results if you don't utilize your resources properly. Whether it is manpower or capital or space or whatever. Not only the value, but the price of a resource, which I think in the government is not the biggest priority. Also because maybe governments have different objectives. But having said that, even if your objective is non-monetary, you have to understand how to optimize the utilization of resources. The other thing which I learned in business was the value of monitoring. If you have to implement a program, how important it is to do milestones. There are techniques available by which you can identify the critical path. And then a business manager, in a sense, is also like an administrator. For example, the civil services or in the Indian administrative service, the officers are generally being accused of being generalists, not specialists. So are business managers. You could rise to the top coming from a particular stream. The other example that I have is that hospitals, for example, now in the last 2 or 3 decades, they have a specialization of hospital administration. So you may be the best of a professional, but administration is a different thing altogether. So I think those are the things which I felt very valuable in business administration.
Beautifully laid out. In fact, I was a science student and I'm a geek that way. And when I had the beautiful opportunity of doing my MBA, I could also derive a lot of concrete hard skills, like the way you're talking about picking up the shortest or the most optimal path and valuing the resource, let's say, from economic lens. With that, Ashok Ji, we are going to pivot a little bit and maybe touch upon your experiences in the services and in IAS specifically. You know that millions write civil services examination. What would be your advice to them as they are preparing for this competitive examination in India based upon your experiences in your career?
My first advice is what I told some of the students when I addressed them in the Delhi University. This was the launch of some serial called the Aspirants. And I said that if your aspiration is only to qualify an exam, then it's a very low aspiration, because you should aspire for something more. Basically, I think those who are appearing or those who want to appear for civil services, aspire for the civil services, I would say, A, you have to be very clear about why you want to join the civil services. The purpose, I think, should be very clear. It's not that you get into the rat race and it's a national pastime, as we used to say in college. Everybody wants to appear for the civil services. And all the others then become second, third, fourth choices. I think that may not be the best way to approach. There has to be some introspection, understanding of yourself. That is one. The other thing that I want to mention is that, what eventually the civil services require is how good your understanding is of what you know. So knowing something is one thing. I may know that Israel has attacked Hamas, but what are the complexities of the situation? What are the different layers of the problems? So you have to try to understand, develop your understanding as much as you can based on whatever. You may not know everything, nobody knows everything, but how well you know it. That is the second thing that I would say. In fact, the example that I give is, cattle, they digest their food in two stages. One, they eat. Second, they masticate. Mastication is what improves digestion. So similarly, the more you try to reflect on what you know will improve your understanding. Final thing, there could be many things which I can say. I can say you should persevere, you should be patient. All that is, I don't want to say that. Everybody knows that. The final thing I want to say is that, people must understand that for every so many people who appear, let's say 1 million people fill up the form last year. Eventually, how many get into the administrative service? 180. So you can work out what the success rate is. So one has to be clear that I am making an attempt. I may not get there, but that's not the end of the life. So I have advised, I'm in touch with so many youngsters who keep writing. I don't know them, but they keep sending me mails. And I keep telling them that, look, it's very important to keep steering, but it is equally important to know when to change course. So try to prepare yourself not only for success, but for temporary failure. It's not a failure fully and finally. It's a temporary failure. And I think there are umpteen examples where people who attempted once, twice, thrice, didn't get through, did something else and excelled in that field. So I would feel that don't be deterred by temporary failures. Don't make this as your last option. This is your first option.
It's really beautiful and especially very critical because it's coming from a senior IAS officer like you. Because many a times, people who haven't cleared it, people might perceive or think that they are supposed to have biases against the services because they couldn't clear it. And here are you, you have cleared it, been there, done that, and still you're advising the right and the most optimal path, like we just discussed. And in fact, our honorable current sitting Prime Minister is also advising youth to not waste their prime years on just appearing for services.
People think that joining the government at whatever level is the only way of public service or serving the society or the nation. I beg to differ. You can be useful to society, you can work for the country in whatever walk of life you are. I mean, you think the country doesn't need good chemists? Doesn't the country need good chartered accountants? And all of them, when they do their work competently and honestly, they are helping build a good system. And ultimately, a nation is known by the kind of systems that it has. I want to disabuse everyone of this notion that the only way they can serve the nation is by joining the government.
Completely conquer. No, I'm a live example of that. Never appear for services, and yet I'm able to give back in my own small manner and shape and format. With that, I would want to talk about the evolving role of services, Ashok Ji. So I've been in management consulting. I've served government as a management consultant as a lateral advisor. And in the same breadth and format, there is technological advancements happening at a very rapid pace, especially when we talk of artificial intelligence. So do you see an evolving role of administrators and bureaucrats now, given that consultants are playing a role? Maybe that's not good for the long term of the government, or maybe that's needed for the government. So what are your comments on consultants' role in government? And if that is the harsh reality, what would be the evolving role of administrators in such case?
So I think as far as the utilization of consultants is concerned, it could take 3 or 4 different forms. One is that you're seeking outside advice. Second is you are talking to people who know more about that particular field. So these are 2 clearly welcome ways in which you can use consultants. But if you're using consultants to do routine work, then it can only show 2 things. One is that you are understaffed, or that you're doing more work than what you can handle. So government probably needs to get out of all those things and trim its portfolio so that it can focus on a few things which its own people can manage. I, for one, don't understand why consultants should be used for doing routine government work. But if you want to use them for expertise, if you want to use them for collecting data, evidence, analysis, more than welcome, because they bring on the table something which the routine paraphernalia in the government doesn't know. Having said that, I also want to say that, basically, if you look at the civil service, the term used for the civil services was that it's a steel frame. So what is a steel frame? It's very rigid. A steel frame is supposed to be rigid, whereas what you require in the complexities of development, especially in a country like India, is resilience, right? But I think one should not think that steel frame, the word was used and the expectation was that you will be rigid. I think it was used because of the expectation that here will be a body of permanent civil servants who will uphold core principles. Because core principles don't change. So that was the expectation. But you're very right, in the changing world where so many different forms of drivers of economic growth are coming in, where there is a revolution of expectations in the society, when there is so much of globalization, where you have to learn from each other, you have to trade with each other. More and more skills are required for civil servants, including the way in which you can use technology for serving the public interests. So whether it is artificial intelligence or it is knowledge of laws that you need to learn, I think all of that, if it is meant for serving the public interests, is very welcome, and you cannot have a civil service which is either indifferent or divorced from that.
I love the choice of word of being divorced from that, and I really like the anecdote or the example that you have taken of the steel frame. With that, Ashokji, I would want to know your perspectives. You have served in the current regime, if I am not wrong, and you have served in many other previous regimes as well. Would you have comments or views on the Modi government's policies impacts, both strengths and any misses, let's say, on bureaucrats and on the governance structures of Government of India?
So I think what you witness in the last decade or so is, and you rightly said, I have been Secretary Civil Aviation, Secretary Environment, Forests and Climate Change. I led the COP21 India delegation where Paris Agreement was signed. I've been Finance Secretary in this government. So one thing which I think is a hallmark is that Mr. Modi is serious about governance. His entire approach to dealing with public issues is that these are serious things and they have to be approached with that degree of seriousness. So governance is not a child's play. You have to resolve conflicting issues. So you should approach it seriously. The second thing which I found was that there were a lot of initiatives taken to resolve intra-government differences, intra-department differences, which sometimes came as a bottleneck in the speed of decision making. So Pragati meetings which he has is an example. And I know I participated in God knows how many Pragati meetings, and they actually served a useful purpose. Because earlier, such a forum didn't exist, where problem resolution was being attempted at that level. The third thing which I think stands out is the speed at which infrastructure growth is taking place. And quite rightly, the government emphasizes, including provides resources for building roads, ports, highways, and the rest of it. So that infrastructure deficiency which a developing country like India faces, I think that is being attempted to be made up. The next, I think, highlight, which I think is very important, is the way digitalization has penetrated our society. And it's really so heartwarming that you go to a vendor, he's selling, say, Nariyal Pan. But there is one QR code sticking out on one of his Nariyal saying that you pay through this. So it's really revolutionized transactions. And it's very good. And in the same vein, because of this trinity of for telephones and Jandhan and all this, the direct benefit transfer which has taken place, I think it has led to what I initially referred to optimal utilization of resources. And while this is at the micro level, if you look at the government business itself, the PFMS, the Public Finance Management System, which was introduced in the earlier government, but it has been executed, implemented with a seriousness in the last decade, which has helped government save a lot of resources, which were lying floating in the system. So the PFMS, I think, is also possible, A, because of technology, and B, because of serious intent. And I think one other feature that I want to really highlight, which has caught on the imagination of people in the last decade, is the use of renewable energy. So these, I think, are positive things. Now, you wanted me to mention some of the negative things. So I think what happens is Mr. Modi is a very strong leader. And I think everywhere you find, whether it is a home or a society or a company or a country or an organization, if the leader is very strong, then a lot of people depend on him more than what they ought to. And that, I think, somewhere affects their ability to take initiative. So I think that is one. And one other thing which I think we are also seeing, that there is more than usual tension between center and states, which is affecting the pace of growth. It is affecting speedy decision making, and I think it is also not conducive to creating a harmonious environment, which is very important for growth.
Beautifully let down. I was serving Government of India from 2016 to 18, and I had an absolute privilege of attending one of the Pragati meetings, and I was just so inspired with the dedication. All the chief secretaries, all the secretaries showed up, and I'm very sure maybe back then I would have seen you somewhere on the screen as well. And yeah, I think I saw or heard certain murmurs around a lot of directives now coming directly from PMO, and a lot of staff members not having that decentralized focus like the way it would have been before. So completely concur with the opinions, Ashok Ji. With that, we move towards a lot of interesting questions around election. This is election year once again. You've been as an election commissioner as well. How do you think, as per your experience, the dynamics of Indian elections have changed over the year during your time as election commissioner and later as well? And especially with the advancing technology, do you think it has changed for the good or changed for the bad?
No, I think the electoral process in India is an evolving process, and I think it goes to the credit of the Election Commission and all other stakeholders that we have not only maintained the system or the structure that was given to us by the Constitution, but there have been many attempts to strengthen it. For example, I mean, we are running the biggest elections in the world. And when you talk to people outside in other countries, they can't imagine the scale of elections in India. 980 million voters and more than 1 million polling booths, 1.3 or 4 million people, 11 million people drafted to conduct the elections. So all this scale is amazing. And the sanctity of electoral rules, I mean, that is one thing which I want to highlight. Because after all, you can exercise your vote only if your name is there in the voters list. So there have been a lot of efforts from day one on how do you improve the quality of your electoral roll. And to give you an example, when Sukumar Sen became the first Chief Election Commissioner, despite the announcement by the Prime Minister in the Parliament that elections will be held in March 1950, he did not conduct the election because he was not satisfied with the electoral rolls. Then the Prime Minister made another announcement later that they'll be conducted in 51. Even then he did not, because he said that unless I make sure that the electoral rolls are fine. So that is one aspect. Eventually the elections were held in September of 51. They went on for 4 months, concluded next year, 52 early. So that is one. But we've come a long way. That time we had a very small electorate of, I think, 160 million. Now we have 980 million. There has been a lot of use of technology in preparation of electoral rolls. I'm not saying that everything has been done. There is still chances, a lot of scope for improvement. For example, deduplication. Satakshi is enrolled as a voter in Goa. She goes to Delhi. She gets herself enrolled there. But she thinks that it's not her responsibility to get herself deleted from somewhere else. And if there is an automatic deletion by the authorities, it can be questioned. Although there is a process. So anyway, that is one aspect. The other is, somehow, even though we have lowered the voting age to 18, you find that the youngsters, they are quite indifferent to getting themselves enrolled. So therefore, there is a mismatch between the demographic cohort of 18, 19 and the new voters. So, I mean, it's something which all of us need to worry about, especially the youngsters. I go to different colleges and tell the college principals that why don't you take pride in the fact that all my students are registered as voters? You initiate that drive. So that is the other part. Then, of course, the introduction of the EVM, which is much maligned these days, that revolutionized, and people really wonder how is it that in India you can declare the election results so fast. So all that has led to the system becoming more efficient, also more transparent, I should say. But that doesn't mean that there are not areas of improvement. I think that we can improve a lot. And the worrisome aspect, I think, about Indian elections is the use of money power and the lack of transparency in funding of elections. So those are things which need to be worked on.
Very beautifully said. And I would want to actually get your views upon a little bit more on scope of improvement. And I have been indulging a little bit in reading the history of India. And it just wows me that there were so many leaders who fought for so long to allow us to have that representation in government. And yet, I think we are losing that legacy and that sense of history when people are not choosing to vote, which is the bare minimum that we can do in the electoral process. Coming back to scope of improvement, you mentioned a lot of things. In fact, there are political parties who also question the EVMs, that they are rigged, they are not rigged. You have been in the center, you have held that, I would safely say, the hot seat. So what would your comment be on such casual comments that are made on the machines? That's one. Second, I also want to know your opinion on the lack of transparency in funding. In fact, I recently was sharing with my viewers that BJP raised approximately 700 CR last financial year and Congress raised 70 CR. We are talking about a 10x jump. How would the other party even survive? And we do not have that transparency yet. So, two questions, one around transparency and second around the machines.
So as far as electoral funding, and that particularly bonds, I think you're referring to electoral bonds, which is an instrument that was created in 2017. Yeah. Now, the thing is that, to the best of my understanding, nobody can question the legitimacy of this instrument, right? Because what has government said, or what does the law say? That anybody who wants to donate to a political party can go and buy a bond from his designated account. He'll make payment from his designated account. That bond will be given to any party. That party has to deposit it in their designated account and encash it. That does not close other alternative forms of donations. Bless you. So, the legitimacy of the instrument itself cannot be questioned. But what is worrying is that you don't know who is contributing to whom. So it is on this issue of transparency that people have gone to the court, and now the judgment of the Supreme Court is awaited. And I think there is no reason why this information should not be disclosed to the people. Everybody should know. After all, and this is a question I used to ask people, that we need to introspect. I've written an article which was published, I think, in the Indian Express. I said, as a society, we need to introspect that if you want to make a contribution, let's say to climate change, you very gladly do it, openly do it. You want to make a contribution to wildlife conservation, You will be very happy and you will proudly say that I have made this contribution. If you want to contribute to a political party, which is the principal stakeholder of a democracy, why should you be shy about it? So, I don't understand this business of secrecy. Donations or contributions should be made openly. Everybody should know. So that is as far as funding is concerned. There are many other aspects of electoral funding, but I don't think we have the time to go into that. As far as EVM is concerned, see, EVM was considered to be a revolutionary addition to the whole process. A lot of questions are now being raised, have been raised continuously, and it's a debate which has many aspects. What I would say is that the technology which has been used so far, the empirical evidence before everyone so far, the administrative procedure prescribed by the Election Commission and followed by the election machinery so far gives it the character of a robust arrangement. However, people can have doubts. I mean, nobody can stop people from having doubts and raising questions. I think what is required is a well-informed, honest, sincere engagement between those who have doubts and those who are managers of elections. You engage with them. You try to satisfy their curiosity. After all, a technology, nobody can say that a technology is completely infallible. But the point is that a technology which has the protective cover of an administrative arrangement, it has to be explained together. And I think if an extra step is required to be taken to satisfy people, the manager should be willing to consider that step. So I think there is some engagement required. People will always have doubts. 100% people can never be satisfied. But it is one thing for the system to have a faith in itself, and it is another for people to have a faith in the system.
Very beautifully said, and completely concur. And I really like that viewpoint that 100% of the people, of course, can't be satisfied. With that, I would want to get your really rich opinions, because you have held so many interesting positions, from Secretary Finance to Secretary Environment as well. So, in the light of your experiences as Secretary Environment, what are key initiatives that India needs to and India should take on an immediate basis to cater to the climate impact issue? We all know what kind of air index are Delhiites living under. So what would be your view, especially on immediate basis, that India might have to take?
So I think climate change is a very serious business. And in fact, in one of the articles that I wrote, I said that probably this is the only instance in the world, climate change, where collaboration on action is inversely proportionate to the conviction about its seriousness. Yeah, it will require some sacrifices, it will require some costs, it will require some adjustments to be made. So as far as India is concerned, the positives are that India is the only country, or one of the few countries, which has met its commitments which were made earlier. Even the NDCs which were declared, the nationally determined contributions, as far as the latest report, the biennial update report, India is on track to achieving its goals, which it had set for itself. In fact, it is only because of that in Glasgow, India enhanced its ambitions. So the entire thrust on renewable energy is very, very good, very welcome. And I see when I travel within the country that people are adopting this. But the decarbonization of economy that we need to do, I think we need to accelerate the pace of decarbonization. We might argue before everyone that we are meeting our targets, but that doesn't mean that we cannot do much better, or that we are matching up to the seriousness of the crisis. So I think decarbonization requires a lot of effort. It will have to be calibrated. And that is what the energy transition, just energy transition is all about. That you will not overlook the interests of many stakeholders who might have to, who will be affected during this process of transition. So we have to take care of everyone. Third thing, which is very important and which will have results, which will show results in the immediate term, is the spending on adaptation. So your agriculture sector might be suffering, your fisheries might be suffering, the coastal areas might be affected by climate change. So we have to spend money in adapting ourselves to the change that we are witnessing. Mitigation will take place, but it will show results in the long run. And one other thing which I cannot stop highlighting is the need for capacity building. We have to build huge amount of capacity in all sections, in all segments, because people don't understand what climate change is. They think that everything that is polluting is climate change. No. So you have to understand what climate change is. You have to understand what are the interventions required. You should have the ability to evaluate the impact of the action that you take. So a lot of effort on capacity building, and simultaneously, I think energy efficiency and conservation. They require, I am happy, and in fact, I can take satisfaction in the fact that India was one of the only country which had included conservation and change of lifestyle as one of the nationally determined contribution. And it has come back on center stage. Now the world is talking about changing lifestyles. We have to conserve, and it goes back to what I said in the beginning. Can we do more with less? So one of the additional R's in that 3 R's is refuse. Don't do something, don't consume something that you don't need. So you have to refuse to consume. So I think conservation, energy efficiency, adaptation, decarbonization, energy transition, those are all the things. And I think India is doing quite well. The only thing is that can it do it faster?
Completely agree. And especially, I really like your point around capacity building on climate impact. I told you that I'm in Goa, and I was just kind of implicitly comparing Goa to Bali. And there is one thing that I've been really impressed with Bali, that the natives really worship nature. And here I am witnessing a phenomena that a lot of people burn their trash. I'm not sure if they're natives or if they're outsiders, but maybe that basic capacity building at the ground level may be the need of the hour. With that, I know that we are limited on time, and I would want to rush upon a few more questions that we had. And once again, thinking from the young professional who will be watching this. So Ashok Ji, as you might be aware that most of the people take civil services examination for the status, for the power, for the perks, for the salary as well. You have been there, you have done that. Would you be comfortable sharing maybe what were the perks, what were the salaries that Secretaries of India may have and may be lacking as well?
You know, the maximum salary that the highest official in the government gets is, I think, $2,500 per month.
As of today, 2024, or this goes back
Yes.
to your time? Nice.
As of today.
The highest.
The highest paid civil servant would get a salary of, at current rates, a little over $2,500 or $3,000. Now with the seventh pay commission, $3,000 is the maximum. But other than the salary, I think you get a good accommodation. You have telephone facilities. You get to travel so much within the country, and you have access to so many things. So I think there are a lot of perks. But I would feel, that other than looking at the perquisites in material terms, you should consider the authority that you get, the responsibility that you have, also as a perquisite, because it gives you so many opportunities, and the status that you have in the setup. At a young age of 25, 24, I was a subdivisional magistrate. I was not even 24 when I became a subdivisional magistrate. And people hold you in such high regard. Whether it is industrialists or it is social organizations, whether it is any kind of educational institution, they are all, open their doors for you. And I would say that they're even willing to, most of them are willing to support you if you're doing your good work. So that's a big perk, that if you want to do something good, the body of people who are willing to support you. That's a big perk. People don't get this kind of support easily. So I think you should look at it from that point of view. And yeah, you might not have that kind of corporate lifestyle. But as I said, many doors open for you. And you build connections not by your authority. You build connections by your work that you do. And also, I can say it from personal experience, that it is because of the several opportunities that I got that I've been able to write all these books that I've written. I've written 2-3 books already. There are more in the offing. So the rich experience that you get, it's a perk of it.
Rich and varied, I must say. And I have one curiosity that has been lingering with me since quite some time. So how do postings take place in government? So I know that DOPT is there, it's controlling the postings, but do people have a say? Were you passionate, let's say, about climate impact? Were you able to then influence and say that, can I become Secretary Environment, or how does it take place?
I think there is no method in the madness. And it's pretty much the prerogative of the state government or the central government to put you wherever they think you're right. One can only hope that the people who control the cadre, they utilize your services as per your proficiency. And I would say that it's not as if that's not consciously done. There have been instances where the system picks up the right person for the right job, right? But it's not a policy, right? Or it is not as if that this thing happens in all the cases. Somebody might be fortunate, but then it is also expected from civil servants that wherever you're posted, you're supposed to contribute, because if that position has been created for a civil servant, somebody will occupy that. So I think the expectation is that you do your job, whatever job it is, well.
With that, we are almost at the end of this pod. I have a second last question, which is around capacity building. Ashok Ji, you've been involved with us in capacity building. In fact, you have mentioned that you've been at Delhi University and many other places as well. What would be your opinion? How can government enhance the capacity building of the young IAS officers or the civil servants in the changing face of modern India?
So I'll be brief in answering this question because I know we have less time. As we go forward, there are 5 or 6 areas that need to be focused. One is clearly environment and sustainability. The civil servants, like all other segments of society, should understand the value of environment, protecting environment, and how can you do sustainable growth. The second is more and more laws are being made in a country like India, which is a developing country, and even in the world. With global trade, many new laws came into being. To deal with terrorism, new laws are coming into being. To deal with privacy issues, new laws are coming into being. So I think civil servants have to be up to speed in their understanding and knowledge of laws. The third thing that I would emphasize is that given the huge development agenda which developing countries have, like India, the private sector will have to play a big role. And government servants or governments have to understand how to work with private sector and utilize their talent and resources in the best public interest. So I think that is a skill which people have to acquire. The fourth thing, which actually should have been the first, but it can be put anywhere, is the ethics. Something that you did emphasize in your programs. And Two other things I would like to mention is, one is the use of technology in serving public interest. So technologies keep changing. It's a sign of modernity. So it's not as if only AI is the latest. There could be any other thing. But how can government harness that technology in discharging its fundamental duties and in making itself smarter? And finally, I think one attitude, training, skill that civil servants will require is how to dismantle old organizations, which have become effete. Something which is not required, whether it's an institution or it's a law or it's an organization, if it is not required, then can we just get rid of that? And how do you do it? Because you have issues of audit, you have issues of status quo, and you have issues of lethargy of custom. So there are so many things which we need to understand and deal with this. Only then you can create a new order.
Very beautifully said. In fact, a lot of interesting ideas around teaching updated law and, of course, climate impact as well. If I'm not wrong, I think they're part of the UPSC so-called curriculum for clearing the examination. Few of them are. Few of them certainly can be added as well at a training stage as well. With that, we're almost at the end of this pod of the CEO Diary, Ashok Ji. I actually am a person who likes to celebrate failures. I have publicly said I couldn't clear IIT JEE examination, and yet I have been able to become what I have been able to become, because many times when people look at people like you, then it becomes just such a big, they try to put you on a pedestal and then it becomes unattainable position. So would you be comfortable sharing any of your failures or any of your challenges so that a lot of people can then maybe take a learning from that?
See, I think in terms of challenges, I have always felt, even to this day, I often feel that I don't know enough. And there are situations in which you find that I wish I knew a lot more about the subject so that I could have been able to deal with this. So maybe it is an attitude that you have, that you should not suffer from a sense of self-sufficiency always. You should always feel that there is a lot to be learned. That is one. The other thing is that I also feel that it's challenging for civil servants when you find that sometimes the political establishment does not think long term. And sometimes you find, because you are a part of that system, an important part of that system, and you have to deliver services in the interests of people. So sometimes it's a challenge when you find that the public representatives don't necessarily represent public interest. So I think these are challenges. And as far as failures are concerned, I mean, I could recount many, but you should have the ability to deal with that failure. And once you have the ability, then it ceases to be a failure. It's only that, that time temporarily you felt that I could have done it differently, but you were able to deal with it, and therefore you don't regard it as a failure. So I don't know if I have many things where I can say that, oh, I failed in doing this. See, Satakshi, I want to say that there are many things in which people know what to do, right? They don't know how to do it. And the more you learn how to do things, the more successful you can be. So everybody will know that, oh, this is the right thing to do. How do you get there? So I think that's very important. And it brings me back to that process thing which I mentioned at the beginning. You should understand process. You should understand and realize that you're dealing with human beings. So they don't respond to prompts the way machines respond to prompts. So the whole art of dealing with people, managing your resources, human resources, I think these are very important in administration.
Beautifully said. I absolutely love the choice of word around temporary failures in life, which will eventually enhance the attitude of the person while they're going through adversity. That's the wrap up of this CEO Diary pod, Ashok Ji. Thank you so much for your time. I am leaving this pod leaving a little more enriched and, of course, more insightful as well. Would absolutely love if you would want to have any last words for our audience who will be watching this.
I think in the end, what I would like to say is that what I have said is not even 10% of what I would have loved to say. But in terms of feeling satisfied or recollecting what gave you satisfaction, I have felt that there are 3 or 4 ways in which one derived satisfaction. One was whether you were able to contribute to changing the system. The other is whether you are able to deal with tricky situations. And the third is whether you are able to build infrastructure, which also means building organizations. And I can give you examples of every thing that I have mentioned, but there is no time. But I think more than all these 3 is the satisfaction that you derive when you leave behind a happy citizen. So what you call customer satisfaction, according to me, that has been the primary objective and the primary source of satisfaction. When you, for example, I receive a letter from somebody who had interacted with me 20 years back, and he says that I'm so happy that this is what you did for us. So I think that gives me more satisfaction than anything else. So thank you very much, Satakshi, and I wish you and your initiative great success.
Thank you so much, Ashok Ji, once again for your time. It's always a pleasure listening to you. And here's to being a satisfied and a responsible citizen in this year and for our entire lifetime as well.